don't forget your homework assignment is tonight. You know,
Right.
you've got teachers now who can Twitter homework assignments, who can actually send via text messaging, don't forget your project's due tomorrow. You know, and I think there's nothing wrong with that as long as parents are okay with that and the kids are okay with that. You know, for nowadays everyone has the max texting minutes, so I don't think you're causing them to go bankrupt on one text that you're sending about school. So, you know, technology is phenomenal. Like, I'll give you a great example. I predict, and this is now on video, so I question, we're in a media center right now. I really question if these will exist in 7 years.
Yeah, I was thinking the same
money,
thing.
I mean, one, it's money because books are expensive, and I'm waiting for a large school district, for example, to go in like Chicago Public Schools or LA Unified or whatever, to say, look, we can buy every single kid a Kindle for $59 and it'll include 10,000 titles. Right. Or, anything.
At the Apple thing.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I finally broke down. I bought the iPad, and I'll never buy a book again. And I'm a language arts teacher. I love books. I love the concept of turning the page. And after reading my first 2 novels on the iPad, I don't think I'll ever buy a book again. And so the question is, it's not what we feel comfortable about. It's what do kindergartners feel comfortable with. And so that's what you have to look at. What will those kindergartners demand in regards to technology by the time they're 8 years from now and they're in middle school? And that's the stuff we have to think about, not necessarily about what we feel comfortable with in regards to technology.
Yeah, and I find that happens a lot. You know, we in order to solve problems after school, we get together with a bunch of teachers. You know, and when we're making curriculum, we're getting together with a bunch of teachers. But we're not getting together with necessarily the kids.
What's interesting, some curriculum models now, especially for whether it's textbook adoptions or anything curriculum-wise, what great middle schools will actually do is bring in some kids and actually look over those materials prior and give feedback on what they liked about it and what they didn't. And same with you planning a lesson. If you're getting ready to do a big interdisciplinary unit or some unit of study, maybe a week before, show the kids what it looks like. 5 or 6 kids, get some feedback. They're focus groups. Industry uses focus groups all the time. We have the best focus groups on the face of the earth. They're called our kids. The problem is we don't have time to have them be reflective and us be reflective with them. We're more worried about what the next lesson is and moving on.
Right. And I guess I'm gonna. I guess I'll go to your career a little bit and use that as sort of like an analogy to how a teacher feels, let's say, successful. Now, do you find yourself in the classroom very much nowadays?
I do. A lot of my work, like I said, I worked 13 years for National Middle School Association, and at that time, I did go to my boss one time and say, I need a sabbatical. I need to go back and be with kids. And so I hadn't worked with certain populations of kids, and so I wanted to go, and I actually went back and worked with some schools and loved that. And then now a lot of my work is actually long-term job-embedded professional development, where I'm in schools, for example, in Lima, Ohio. I'm in Lima, Ohio 10 days a year. So I'm actually meeting with teachers while they're in school during their team time. And if there's an issue with a kid, we'll actually bring the kid in and actually work with the kid. I'm actually going to teach with 4 different teachers there in Lima for a day, in the classroom with them teaching. So as a consultant, it always sounds like you're not connected. That's only by choice. I can pile myself behind magazines and articles and writings. That's just not me. What it is really about teacher connections. And if I'm in a school for that day and there's kids, I'm always in the hallway, checking out the kids, trying to see what the culture of the school is, and yelling at them to walk.
Okay.
Because
walk.
You can't take that away from a teacher. It's my only right.
Oh man, yeah, I was a lifeguard, and I pulled one kid out, but made him walk, don't run. And so as somebody who I'm kind of interested in, like, seeing my career go into doing presentations like you're doing over here and all that. What was your first step getting into professional development? Like, how long have you been teaching, and when did you hear the call?
Right. 2 things. I think that first of all, in education, we have this myth. It's not a myth. I think it's actually reality when I say that. Is that you are not an expert in your own school. You have to be an expert 50 miles away to be an expert in that area, because really. Teachers have a hard time teaching teachers in their own building. But that's actually where I started, was actually doing professional development for our staff. And then from there I went and started to do presentations at the Colorado Middle School Association. And that's really where things kind of took off. Some people at National Middle School noticed me and then asked me to come apply. I applied, and 3 weeks later, I was moving to Ohio to work for them. So I think it's about putting yourself out there and being willing to share your things. In other words, share your materials. My first presentation was actually language arts strategies, where there was no philosophy at all. It was literally me going through the paper plates, every activity that I could potentially show teachers. I might give a little snippet of why I philosophically did it, or where it aligned in the curriculum. No offense. Teachers don't give a crap where it aligns in the curriculum. If it's a good strategy, you're smart enough to figure it out.
Right.
So it was really about, here are 20 things I do in my classroom, and we're going to go over an hour to do them, one right after the other. And people walked away going, I'll at least do 3 of them.
Right.
So that's what I really encourage people to do, is start with your own building and then eventually go to your state conferences and present there. Teachers are hungry for good professional development. And like I tell teachers, everyone can do what I do, not as well, but they can do what I do, if they would take the courage to just start teaching each other. Because the best professional development, when you hear it from anybody, is teacher to teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like today, if I would have stood at a podium and lectured and, had my notes and read off a speech, that's not engaging. That's not the kind of it's not the kind of professional development you want.
And I find that a lot of these professional developments, very knowledgeable people, but they've basically looked at the state standards, and they don't come in here and ask, well, what do you need as a school? It's like when I go to buy a car and they just show me the most expensive car. They don't ask, what do you want?
It was interesting. I'll never forget when we had to start putting the objectives in our grade book. This was the start of the movement towards accountability and high-stakes testing and curriculum. And I'll never forget, everything in the grade book had to be like 1.7.6. And literally, if it was graded, it had to correlate with a piece of curriculum. And my principal, Mark Whitney, who was phenomenal, instead of him coming in and saying he had to do that, he actually knew of 3 teachers who had kind of started it. And in the faculty meeting, they just presented what they were doing. And I remember sitting there going, well, I can do that. Versus originally I was adamant that I wasn't going to do this. How dare you question what I put in my grade book? But when I saw one of my colleagues do that, I go, oh, that's easy. And then, so that's what we want, is just show me how to do it in a very practical, easy way, and then I can adapt it for myself.
Okay, good. I'll close on something that it's when I'm the most stressed out as a teacher, is when I have to give grades, and I got that kid who I know that he meets these standards that I see every quarter or whatever, I've read them, but I know he meets those standards, but technically he's failing, as far as the barometers that I have. What can I do? Like, I need to have evidence, right?
Right,
like,
you do. And part of it is that there are students whose grade does not correlate with their knowledge.
Right.
And that will always be the case. Problem is now with accountability, it just makes it a little bit tougher. I think part of it is that with that kid, it's having that conversation to say, you have to show me components of this. Now, I'm creative enough to say, how can you show me your knowledge of this piece of curriculum, either using the materials I just gave you or something you can do on your own.
Right.
Because the idea is we have this mindset that they have to do this worksheet to show knowledge. Well, what if that kid goes, well, I can build you the model of it to show you in 3D scale?
Right.
Fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And then explain it to you which ones that which elements you're trying to cover. I think that takes a lot of courage. It's really differentiation of instruction, which is hard for teachers to do. It's literally saying, I want you to understand this concept, but you're going to do it in a different way. Some of you may need the worksheet. Some of you may need, it goes back to when I taught math for a while. It's like teaching fractions. I had kids cutting paper plates to show half, to doing huge problems in regards to fractions, like word problems and huge concepts with it. But I still had some kids